Fam. I'm a little tangled up here right now at the moment, but as soon as
Breaking news.
as soon as I
We should be having a surprise guest join us,
okay,
actually.
can you
So
hear me at all, fam?
I can hear you perfectly fine.
Testing 1 2 3. There it goes. My bad, fam.
Yes.
Surprise guest.
Yes.
Surprises.
Don't you just love surprises? I know you do. I
Fam,
hate them, but
do you see what I have up over here? Are you even paying attention to what I have in the thing right over there?
yeah.
It says F. Ben Shapiro, fam. Can you tell us why F. Ben Shapiro?
Um yeah. Well, he's trying to make this whole thing about how these left-wing writers are causing all this violence in Peru. That just shows that you have zero clue as to what's going on in the country and you're making this opinion. And he did this pasta in an effort to say that Brazil's elections are getting far more attention. But he's saying it um Brazil's January 6th style, riot thing is getting more attention, and he's saying that that's happening because they're trying to make Brazil's Bolsonaristas look bad. And so because they're right wingers, whereas in Peru, the media isn't talking about it because they're left wing rioters. It's just a very superficial analysis of what actually went down. It's a superficial analysis of both of these countries. Uh, if you don't know what you're talking about, what do you have an opinion? I mean, obviously you're going to have an opinion, but like it's best to have an opinion if you're informed. I mean, he's just completely uninformed
Have
on
you
this whole thing.
have you heard his analysis on Ukraine? I mean, it's
No,
laughable at best. I saw this. I got a tweet up I did a couple like a week and a half ago about Ben Shapiro. The guy just talks a lot of nonsense. Really, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about half the time. He just sounds like he's very educated, and his whole opinions on what's going on in the Ukraine war were just borderline disgusting. So, anyways, that's why I have F Ben Shapiro. I mean, I wish he'd come on. Like, the guy debates against people that he knows he can and beat up. But that's something altogether where what's going on, the whole situation with Brazil, while a lot of people are avoiding us. I was very, very lucky that Addie got me onto this um, Twitter space and I was able to speak. Now, Matthew Turman had
Mhm.
bolted out of the room and running away faster than shit through a tin horn. Let me say that. He was gone. But, what I'm saying, I was able to explain what's going on and give a point of view of what's happening. I feel caught in the middle, fam, because I do not feel that it was a coup. I really do not. I don't think it's a coup. Without a serious military and a really trying to overturn the government. These were angry people that were pissed off, that were led there. And it's really scary to me because I felt they were led on a pack of lies. And I think they're going to find a way to try to compare it to what happened to Donald Trump to say that way Donald Trump's supporters were led by a pack of lies. And
I think this was a coup attempt, 100% though, because it was extreme. It was organized, but it was led and organized not just by Bolsonaro's ardent supporters. It was mostly led and I think pushed by the United States. That's why I think it was a coup. I don't think it was a coup in terms of the Brazilian people really orchestrating this on their own. I think it was a coup because there was intel involved and the intel came to the United States. Just like but in the case of January 6th in the United States, even though we know it was FBI intel, that was them trying to stage and push Trump supporters into something that obviously wasn't anything remotely being a coup. But like when it comes to another country, like if you're the United States pushing that um on Brazilians, I then that is because you're trying to influence the politics of another country. Whereas in the United States, they tried to frame it like the Trumpers were trying to really make some sort of change. And I don't think that, I mean, they were, but they weren't really serious about it. And I think in Brazil though, there was a lot more seriousness to it because in Brazil, it's a very it's there's a lot more of a religious fervor to it. There's a lot more of like an economic fervor to it. There's this whole idea that Lula is such a criminal and that they need to get rid of him. And there's also, of course, the what happened in Brazil is the killings that happened, like the murders that happened before all of that, and the military, parts of the military marching with the Brazilian people. So there was definitely, I think, more of an attempt here, but I don't think it was a coup because of the Brazilian people. I think it was more of a coup because of the influence from the United States. And I don't think you can say, in my opinion, that it wasn't a coup attempt. Yeah, people were angry, but they were also not justifiably angry. Whereas in the United States, we don't have fair elections. So I understand why people are angry. In Brazil, this never happened before. They never did this before. This literally came out of nowhere. Bolsonaro won before under that system. This came, people were led to try to, with some of the elements of our government and the right, to try to push this thing. So I think I don't think it's fair to say it wasn't a coup attempt, because I think that it was, but I think it was influenced by the West more than, like, I don't think Brazilians would have done this on their own, is what I'm saying.
Hey, what is that? Look up the definition of coup, ex Bernie, bro, halfwit, whatever. That's nasty. Couple people out there, their opinions. Listen, we're gonna do. We'll agree to disagree. He says not a coup. I agree with you there too, but there's a nice way to talk to people. We can disagree. However, at the end of the day, and here it is. This is Glenn Greenwald's opinion. We show it. Glenn Greenwald disagrees with Fee, 100% not a coup. Listen, I respect for your.
What is okay? Wait a minute. What does that mean? So because is he a god? Am I not allowed to disagree with him? Like, I just, oh, so and so just, who cares? I don't care when you make statements like that. Like, in Brazil, you have a serious attempt by the U.S. to interfere via ex politicians, ex government officials, a lot of money pouring in. We saw Steve Bannon literally organizing these protests that Danny Shaw went to. Why were they there? I mean, and then you had Bolsonaro flee to Florida, and then you have what was he, the Secretary of Treasury that was literally in Orlando where Bolsonaro was at the same time that this was happening. Like, I'm sorry. I mean, I agree with Garland. Garland laid it out right there, actually. And we didn't come here to talk about Brazil, but
yeah.
That's I mean, Garland said, it makes sense to think that that there's some sort of US influence on this. And that is the definition of a coup attempt by an outside power. I'm not saying that the people of Brazil would have been able to do this by themselves, because I don't think they were. I think they were just mimicking what they thought.
I thought they were totally
the right has been.
They were totally exploited. Their anger was,
of course, but
I think that Camilla's.
But that doesn't mean it was just like their anger was justified.
I get it.
I
believe a coup is a solid mental state to take over the government and turn the government over. You know what I'm saying? I don't think they were doing that. I think they were expressing their anger, and they were exploited and led to think, this is my personal opinion now. So
no, but you're talking about them. I'm talking about outside forces.
There are definitely outside forces. And this is what Stephen B put up here. I think it's a U.S. warning shot to Lula to fall in line. This is something what we saw in Honduras, right? Like, we had seen that, okay, America was cool with it. But then all of a sudden, they get into Congress, and there's some people, defecting to the other side and throwing things upside down as Kamala Harris is showing up there. So I think that they throw these warning shots to say, hey, man, we might have okayed you getting in there now, but don't forget it. Well, we can remove you at any way, shape, or form. We can cause shit to happen, and these people were definitely led, were definitely exploited. Their anger was taken advantage of. I think the great questions that Camilla is asking, and once again, I don't necessarily agree with all of Camilla's assessments on the Bolsonaro people themselves and what's going on, because I do understand when it does come to Brazil, the most vulnerable, the Afro-Indigenous, the people in the favelas, they've pretty much felt like they've gotten their back turned on. And, they wooed. And that's why they are, supporting Lula, because he's helped them out before in the past with his programs and whatnot. So, I think that it's very shallow. It's very myopic, the way people are kind of just the media that's here right now, especially this what we call America First kind of friendly populist right media from the Bannons with Matthew Turmond and all these guys misleading these people with just simple bullshit.
Yeah.
And they are just regurgitating it and thinking that they were cheated. It's very, very different than with Donald Trump in 2020. And I explained these differences on a Twitter space yesterday, fam, clearly stating right out of the gate that Donald Trump was very vocal about what happened. From election night, he was very vocal about what happened. And he had mentioned exactly what was going on, how he was cheated from out of the gate. Bolsonaro hid. He was silent. He was nowhere to be seen. Very rarely spoke. Donald Trump was his best lawyer. He did better than some of the lawyers for him. He was able at the ellipse that on January 6th, he was able to explain from every state and how he was cheated and what was going on exactly. Bolsonaro couldn't do this. They kept on moving the goalpost. They kept on inciting the military. And anytime you want to get the military involved, forget about it. Fam, we have a guest here, a special guest. You want to introduce?
Yeah. So breaking news, our special guest is Scott Ritter, and Scott Ritter was just banned on Twitter again.
No.
And I didn't know this because I had just seen him on Twitter a few hours ago, I thought.
So did I.
So welcome, Scott. What the hell? What's going on?
Only Twitter knows. I mean, there's theory. Clearly, it's not anything I tweeted. When they let me back on, there was no preconditions. I had refused to delete tweets that they had found offensive, which was one of the reasons why this drama dragged on. And they just up and reinstated it, which meant that every tweet that I had sent out previously was clearly legal.
Right.
But then I was testing the system, as I always do, because I don't trust Elon Musk. I don't trust Twitter. I don't trust the system. So I simply retweeted the original offending tweet. And now in talking to people, the other thing that happened, as soon as I came on, my account was swarmed by these NAFO, bots and whatever. And they, of course, every tweet you send out, they just flood Twitter with complaints. And I'm just guessing that some low-level Twitter, one of their highly paid PhD social media experts. And what I mean by that is, somebody with a third grade education simply panicked and said, delete this guy because we're getting flooded with complaints, which is the NAFO tactic. And I've said all along that Musk has a NAFO problem, that if he wants to fix Twitter, he needs to bring those Shiba Inus to heel.
Yeah. Fam, I just wanted to mention too as well, Scott, I was interested. We were talking about, hey, how about we get Scott Ritter and Scott Horton on the same show together and call it to Two Scotts? And it's just interesting because Scott Horton, once again, I think you're a lot like him as far as like, I don't believe that you could call you a 9/11 truther, right? Like you're not filled in the truth of conspiracy theory kind of network, where a lot of people, when they were taking people down, they were saying the conspiracy theories that they were putting up there. You stay far away from that stuff. Same as with Horton. I've never seen you in that arena before. Why do you think they did take you down? Do you think this is completely just about the geopolitics here?
Well, yeah, I frankly speaking, I think it's purely about the geopolitics. I have been heavily targeted by the Center for Countering Disinformation, which is a Ukrainian government entity created, funded by the U.S. government, supported by the State Department. Not only have they put me on a blacklist, calling me an information terrorist, a war criminal worthy of being arrested and prosecuted as such, they've transferred my name over to what's called the Mirotvorets list, which is the peacekeeper list run by the Ukrainian Special Services, which is a hit list. They kill people on this list. And we see them in action. Just last Friday, I I did an event here at the local library, and they tried to shut it down. They sent these operatives in who shouted down, it disrupted the events, brought in local media to try and discredit what we were doing, et cetera. It backfired on them because the video that of the event has been seen 120,000 times, and the more than 3,000 comments that are made, with the exception of fewer than 5, are all positive towards the position I had taken. So it backfired, but in the process of doing that, they, again, the whole NAFO Ukrainian crowd swarmed everything about me, anybody affiliated with me. I was supposed to speak on Sunday at the Russian Samovar restaurant. It was a big book event that was done up that's been in planning for months. And unfortunately, yesterday I was notified by the Russian Samovar that they had to cancel because they had received so many phone calls, that they feared for the success of their business, for the survival of their business. So, there is cancel culture out there. It's not a conspiracy theory. I don't have to pretend. I don't have to make anything up. It's there. It's alive. It's well. It's living. And I am 100% convinced that my Twitter account was a victim of the same thing.
All right. So I guess my question's gonna go into a little bit of what you are censored with for a lot, which is of what you've been saying about Russia, Ukraine. Now, where we're at, what we've been seeing the last few days is Ukraine just getting pummeled, right? Getting completely pummeled. And also, we saw one of the daughters of one of the Ukrainian elite just partying with champagne while all of this is happening. We've also seen the United States ramp up, of course, their attempts to give more weapons and more weapons. Billions and billions were just approved in Congress for more. Where are we right now in this conflict? Where are we as far as where Ukraine is? Because a lot of the rumors have been suggesting that this is just, I mean, now it's really, really bad for Ukraine.
Well, it's been bad for Ukraine for some time now. It's been bad for Ukraine, I would say, since April. It's amazing how people don't know how to put things into a proper perspective. The Russians kicked off their special military operation, I think, with some bad perceptions about how reality was on the ground. It's clear that they thought that they could accomplish a lot with a little. They went in with 200,000 troops, and they went in thinking that there was going to be less resistance than there was, and there was more resistance, and it turned out they had insufficient troops to accomplish what they were seeking to accomplish. So they transitioned from phase 1 to phase 2, which was to solely focus on the Donbass, and they were doing the meat grinder. The success we're seeing at Bakhmut and Soledar today were successes that were taking place in May, in June. But then the United States injected, tens of billions of dollars of equipment and assistance into Ukraine, providing literal lifeline. And that was a game-changing event. And we saw, once Ukraine received, the largesse, the weaponry and the troops that were trained, that the Russians didn't have enough troops to man a 1,500 kilometer frontage. The Ukrainians were able to penetrate, and the Russians had to pull back and consolidate. That's what happened in September and October. They appointed a new commander, General Surovikin, and his job was to stabilize the front. And he has done that. And but when we talk about all this, the counteroffensives and all that, the one consistent that has been in place since May is that Ukrainian troops are dying in droves. No matter how you want to draw arrows on a map, each day Ukrainian corpses are piling higher and higher and higher. That has not changed. And an army can only absorb so many casualties before there is an impact on its ability to fight in a coherent fashion. The Ukrainians have suffered horrific losses. Their burn rate, which is how I refer to not just human casualties, but their equipment casualties, is extraordinarily high. Their replenishment rate is extraordinarily low. The Russians, on the other hand, have a low burn rate, high replenishment rate, and so we're looking right now. Surovikin has accomplished his mission. He solidified the front. He stabilized the front. He has created the conditions for a successful next phase of the operation, which I believe will be a decisive phase, because Russia has accrued all of the advantages. But now we see Gerasimov taking over, Surovikin becoming a deputy. How did that happen? Why did you take the commander and make him a deputy? Because the scope and scale of Russia's military involvement is about to expand. I think that we're going to see things happening in Ukraine that are show that Russia is deadly serious about finishing this task of demilitarization, denazification. And that's where we are. But Ukraine has suffered just horrific casualties. And the other thing I'd like to point out, though, is that when we talk about military math, we can say Ukraine suffered horrific casualties, and we make it sound like it's a one-sided fight. Then we can say things like the casualty ratios are, 1 to 6, 1 to 8, 1 to 10. So for every dead Russian, you have 6, 8, or 10 dead Ukrainians. Well, that makes it sound okay too for Russia. If Ukrainians are suffering 1,000 dead a day, and the best kill ratio is 1 to 10, that's 100 dead Russians a day. The United States lost the will to fight in Vietnam, losing 200 plus men a week. Russia, on its best week, winning all the victories that it is suffering 500 to 700 dead a week. A week. People need to let that sink in. This war ain't cheap. This war ain't easy. This is the most horrific thing Europe has experienced since the Second World War. Nothing's come close to it. So even though we talk about Ukraine getting pummeled, Ukraine getting beat, I think we also need to reflect on the fact that this comes with a cost, a very heavy burden for the Russian people, for the Russian command, for the Russian leadership, for the Russian nation. And it's something in the West we just, because we've trivialized this conflict so much. We've turned it into a meme. We've done everything except talk about the reality of it. And we're at the point, where, now it seems, that everything that people have been saying about Ukraine's demise, is coming true. You can't spin it away. And so a lot of emphasis is placed on the suffering of Ukraine, and Ukraine is suffering a lot. So is Russia. And we should never forget that point.
Well, let's look at the math real quick, because it's a very interesting point you just brought up, right? That Ukraine is suffering some serious casualties. Okay. How long can the Ukrainians last under these conditions? And when will Kiev fall? Because we can keep supplying weaponry, and we are supplying some troops. It's obvious we've seen NATO troops on the ground. The West has been going in there. I think they've also outsourced some of the troops to these mercenary groups, and they can go in there for a while. We have enough money to pay for them to have that going. But how long until the math just it can be no longer? Ukrainians have run out of troops. They have run out of people willing to fight this war. And even though the price has been paid is a high price for Russia to pay, which you just pointed out, how much longer can the Ukrainians last under these conditions, Scott?
Look, we're being told by NATO and Ukraine that anywhere from 40 to 70,000 Ukrainian troops are in a training pipeline in NATO in the Western countries. And we've been told that there are, new tranches of equipment coming in, Bradley fighting vehicles, the Martyr, things of that nature, AMX-10 light tanks, potentially other tanks as well. But when you put down the calendar of this, let's take, for instance, the Patriot missile system, the single battery that the United States is providing. Ukrainian troops have to go to Fort Sill or to White Sands Missile Testing Range in Texas to receive the training necessary to operate that. It takes 5 months. So the Patriot isn't going to be deployed into Ukraine until May at the earliest, probably June, maybe later. So you put that down on the calendar. When are the Bradley fighting vehicles going to be ready? Because they have to be brought out of storage. They have to be brought up to proper maintenance, etc. Meanwhile, Ukrainian troops have to be trained to operate that. So let's say April, the same thing with the Martyr. My point is, everything Ukraine's being provided is not going to arrive on the battlefield at the same time. It's going to come in staggered. So why do I bring this up? And the same thing with the troops being trained. They're going to come in staggered as well. When Russia starts its counteroffensive, which I believe will be sometime in early February, they are going to be, I believe, putting tremendous stress on the Ukrainian system. There's going to be fighting on multiple fronts, very intense fighting. It's not going to be localized fighting like only Bakhmut, only Soledar. There's going to be, a very widespread, broad-scale fighting, which is going to consume the Ukrainians, consume them. And why is this important? As long as Russia can maintain this pressure, this burn rate going on, as these Ukrainian troops come in from their training pipeline, as this equipment comes in, Ukrainians aren't going to be able to hold it back and bring everybody into a consolidated strike force. They're going to have to commit these troops immediately in piecemeal fashion, and they're just going to get ground down too. And and the reason why I bring all this up is that's Ukraine's strategic reserve right now. That's the force they claim they need to win the war against Russia. That's the force they claim that if they can bring it together and consolidate it. You remember General Zaluzhny's comments to The Economist about give me 300 tanks, 500 infantry fighting vehicles, 500 artillery pieces, and I can win the war. Well, the West is trying to give them that. But Russia is not going to give them a chance to put all of that into a single strike force. It's going to be committed piecemeal into a war that Russia, if it maintains the pressure, will be dictating the terms. And this means that strategic reserve is going to be destroyed before it ever had a chance to do what it's intended to do. And once it's gone, there's nothing left. There's literally nothing left. And at that point, Russia wins. Now, the problem for Russia is that while they do have sufficient resources to do the task I just explained, the point is Ukraine's a big country. What happens when Russia liberates all of the Donbass? That extends its frontage. Why is that important? Because for every kilometer of frontage that you add, you have to put 200 men on, 250 men on. So now as you start to extend your frontage from 1 kilometer, you extend it 500 kilometers, 1,000 kilometer extension of the frontage requires 250,000 troops to man. Russia only mobilized 300,000. They may have another 120,000 volunteers in the pipeline, maybe a few more, in addition to the 180,000 they already have deployed on this thing. Russia has enough troops to do a specific task that may include recapturing Kharkov, that may include conquering all of the 4 districts that have been absorbed and expanding beyond that, maybe taking Nikolaev, maybe taking Odessa. But that's it. Everybody keeps going Kiev, Kiev, Kiev. Kiev is a city of 5 million. Russia, in order to take that, Russia is going to have to commit 250, 300,000 troops that they don't have. So I think that we're looking at 2 phases of this conflict. One is the destruction of the main Ukrainian military, which Russia is getting ready to do. And I think that will be accomplished by the end of summer, early fall. But then there's going to be a political phase where Ukraine has to be compelled to accept unconditional terms of surrender that bring about the denazification element of that. And that's going to be a more tricky proposition because I don't believe Russia can't make the same mistake they already made, which is to overextend its forces, create gaps in its defensive line that can be exploited by a Ukrainian counterattack. So I think that while the Ukrainian army is going to be defeated this year, the political defeat of Ukraine, I think, is going to be a longer proposition that's going to factor in a lot of economic woes. And the thing that's going to kill Ukraine is next winter, not this winter, next one.
Fam,
If Ukraine still exists, it won't exist after next winter. It won't exist as a nation state.
well, I just want to really follow up really quick, fam, because I know you'll have something to say about this as well. When I ask when will Kiev fall, I'm not really saying when will the Russians take Kiev. It's just that we understand the tactics that have been implied and used by the Zelensky government as soon as they got into power in 2014. And it's more of a terrorist guerrilla warfare where we see these pictures inside the Donbass region where they're attacking civilians. So even if we beat their standing army, Scott, aren't we going to have to deal with these type of tactics in that in some way or the other, maybe not militarily, but politically, there has to be a change in Kiev? Otherwise, how can the people of the Donbass ever sleep peacefully?
Well, remember, this is more than the Donbass. This is Russia. This is about Russia sleeping peacefully. The Donbass is part of Russia now. Yeah. So this is a Russian conflict, not a Donbass conflict. And what Russia can't do is allow a festering cancerous wound to exist long term. Russia has to solve this problem. And I think the solution is going to come from within Ukraine. I think Russia, again, I don't pick up the phone and call Putin or Gerasimov or Shoigu or Lavrov. I wish I could. I wish I had that influence.
He might be able to do that. Fam, can you get on the horn with them? No.
Yeah, they get them to answer. But so I have no clue. This is just an assessment. But because I believe that this war, this conflict, has both a military and a political component to it, that the Russians are going to shape the military battle that maximizes the potential for political settlement. And Putin provided some sort of, I believe, insight into the thinking of the Russians when he answered a question by a Hungarian journalist last fall at the Valdai conference that he had. The Hungarian journalist asked him sort of tongue-in-cheek, when's a good time to visit Odessa? And Putin said sooner rather than later. But then he went on and summarize his comments. He alluded to the fact that Odessa was going to be the key to either the peaceful resolution of this conflict or the center of the defeat, the decisive defeat of Ukraine. So I've come up with a concept that I call the Odessa moment, meaning that I believe Russia has sufficient military force to liberate the totality of the Donbass, to retake Kherson, retake Zaporizhia, all of the territories, to probably take Kharkiv or Kharkov, and then push the Ukrainians back before pausing at Nikolaev and telling the Ukrainians, this is your last chance. Surrender now, get rid of the Nazi regime, and we will allow you continued access to the sea. We will allow you to have viability as a modern nation state. Should you turn us down, should you insist on continuing to fight, then we will take Odessa, link up with Transnistria, and you will be forever a landlocked agricultural rump state. And that's your future. And I think at that point in time, Ukraine will come under tremendous pressure from the West that recognizes the inevitability of Ukrainian collapse, the inability of NATO to sustain the conflict, and Zelensky will be removed, and somebody who is capable of sitting on the table and accepting those terms will be put in. That's one way I see this shaping up.
On the other hand, though, the United States and NATO, of course, continue to supply weapons, and while simultaneously, for instance, the United States does deny that they are fighting a proxy war against Russia, the Raytheon CEO admitted that that they are giving Ukraine real-time intel on Russian troops. I mean, this was admitted. So while they're saying, oh, we're not actually fighting a proxy war against Russia, they're providing obviously not just weapons and billions in aid, but now direct intel on these Russian troops. So how much longer can the United States and NATO just continue saying, oh, hey, we're just helping Ukraine. We have to help Ukraine. I mean, Zelensky was on the Golden Globes video feed today because he's Zelensky. I mean, this has been happening since the beginning of the conflict, but now what you're seeing is more people catching on to it, whether it's because of you and other people that are like have been speaking out in independent media, whether it's because it's tiring now, especially in the United States where the state of affairs of the economy isn't good, especially in Europe with the high cost of electricity and power. So how much longer can this be denied in those terms by the United States when we're now everybody's figuring out, oh, there's intel, oh, Twitter is obviously, you know, manipulating this in favor of Ukraine. Oh, all of these revelations are happening.
Look, what you're describing is what I call information warfare. I mean, it's real, especially the intelligence. The intelligence provided by the United States has a definite lethality aspect to it, meaning that the Ukrainians are able to use that intelligence to better target Russian forces and inflict more harm on Russia. But the Russian approach from the very beginning of this conflict has been one of escalation management. I mean, Russia has done everything in their power to prevent this conflict from spinning out of control. You know, they didn't overreact when the Crimea bridge was struck. They didn't overreact when Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines were blown up. They haven't overreacted. They've responded in a measured yet escalatory fashion, but the escalation has been, you know, predictable, etc. I think that Russia is not going to lose sight of its ultimate objective, which is to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. The biggest mistake Russia could make would be to overreact to something and bring NATO into the conflict. That would be self-defeating in terms of the victory that Russia is almost assured of getting in Ukraine. And it could be life terminating for everybody if the conflict goes nuclear. So I think the Russians are seeking to manage that. Look, from the United States perspective, understand this. We were providing the Afghan government with billions of dollars of equipment as of late July, early August 2021. When the end was there, we were still deluding ourselves into, we've got this under control. Here's the equipment. Here's more helicopters. Here's more aircraft. Here's more guns. Here's more this. Here's more that. And then we walked away because that's what we do. We walk away. I mean, I've been trying to explain to the pro-Ukrainian crowd as much as I can that the United States is not the friend of Ukraine. We don't care about Ukraine. We don't like Ukraine. We're using Ukraine. When Lindsey Graham says we want to fight to the last Ukrainian, that's exactly what we want to do. If we cared about Ukraine, we would never tolerate what's happening. We'd never allowed what's happening right now in terms of their infrastructure, you know, the destruction of their infrastructure. We wouldn't allow Ukraine to sacrifice, you know, basically the genetic material of its future, all of its manpower dying on the battlefield. Think of the generations that are lost now because of this conflict. You know, and you know, but we're not. We don't like Ukraine. We don't care about Ukraine. We're using Ukraine, and so is NATO. Ukraine will never become a member of NATO. We've known that from day one. We only sought to bring them in to create this very crisis that has been provoked so that we could weaken Russia, we could strain Russia, we could remove Putin from power, and we could begin the process of breaking Russia up into various component fiefdoms, which is something we've been trying to do since the 1990s. No one likes Ukraine. No one. And so the Ukrainians need to come to that understanding that there will come a time when the West is going to tire of them and just walk away.
Yeah.
They're going to do the Pontius Pilate. They're going to wash their hands, and Ukrainians are going to get crucified. And it's very tragic. It's very sad, but it's very real.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, Ukraine is also one of the most corrupt places on the face of the earth. You know, there's a lot of weapon smuggling, human smuggling, sex trafficking, the whole 9 yards. When I think about the weapons and I think about what you just said, I think that a lot of Ukrainians are going to catch on and understand that the West is not their friend. I think that a lot of people within Kiev realize that right now. With that being said, is there any chance for an organic coup inside of Ukraine taking place? In other words, them just taking this matter into their own hands, saying, listen, we need the West out of here. We need to broker a deal with Russia. We need to get rid of Zelensky. Is there any chance, or is the West so fortified and their claws are so deep inside of Kiev that there's no chance of these people standing up for their own sovereignty? What are your thoughts there, Scott?
Well, I don't think there's going to be a Maidan. I don't think there's going to be a rush of Ukrainian civilians rushing the presidency to get rid of Zelensky. The coup, I believe, is going to come from within the military. You know, one thing you can say about military men and women is they serve their nation. They love their nation, regardless. Even in Nazi Germany, the Wehrmacht soldiers who weren't Nazis loved Germany and were willing to fight and defend Germany. Not Nazi ideology, but Germany, the German homeland. And this again comes to why I'm such a big proponent of what I call the Odessa moment, because the Odessa moment that I described is a come to Jesus moment for the Ukrainian military, that they've been led down this path of national self-destruction by NATO in the West and by a presidency that caters solely to the interest of NATO in the West. And if you present Ukraine with an Odessa moment that the president, Zelensky, is unable or unwilling for any number of reasons to take advantage of, I do believe at that point in time, military officers who know the truth, who know that this is irreversible in terms of the Russian victory, that continued resistance is futile, that all you're going to do is destroy the nation further, just kill thousands more men and lose more territory, that some general officers will take matters into their own hands, and either they will exile Zelensky or they'll give him the 75-cent solution, which is the cost of one 9mm bullet in the back of his head. And I do believe that is the that is the future for Zelensky. He's either going to be forced out of office and given the chance to live abroad in one of his mansions, or he's going to be killed should he seek to stay on. But we already see the West is walking away from Zelensky. We see that in just the way that media coverage is focusing now on Zaluzhny and other Ukrainian generals as being the heroes. The defense ministry is taking front stage, and Zelensky, yes, he was recently trotted out for his services to assist Congress in justifying a lame duck session to vote in $65 million worth of aid. But today he's not much of a factor anymore. He's not as useful as he once was. The generals are becoming more useful, and I think the generals are the future for Ukraine in terms of conflict resolution.
And my last question, because I can tell you're not feeling well. For the longest time, a lot of people have been asking why Russia went in, and this has been talked about ad nauseum. Could they have avoided something? Where is the anti-war movement? Why is nobody talking about peace? Why is nobody why are so many people kind of taking sides in this war and being cheerleaders either for Russia or Ukraine without regard to human life? And I see that sentiment mainly coming from a lot of people in the West, a lot of people who consider themselves anti-imperialist. Is there any sort of I don't want to say like reason, but is there any sort of value, any sort of validity in understanding that by fighting NATO, essentially, which is what Russia's doing, via Ukraine, which is what's being used to wage this proxy war against Russia, that is kind of a push against the empire? Because I mean, it is from the Russian perspective, it's an existential fight for Russia as we understand it, but many don't understand that. Many say that it's still violent, that Russia doesn't have to do this, that maybe if they would just go back to the negotiating table, even though we've seen, here, that Russia has tried time and time again to negotiate. Of course, negotiate doesn't mean you just let NATO and the United States and their allies walk all over you. So there's that sentiment still with people, though, like this has to end. Russians are dying, as you mentioned. Ukrainians are dying. War isn't pretty, obviously. There's no need to glorify it. But is there any sort of validity to that sentiment that if you're an anti-war person, you should be demanding everything stop and that peace happen?
Well, I mean, first of all, the American anti-war movement crashed and burned after the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. It just disappeared. And it has not been able to successfully reconstitute itself since that time. And even within the anti-war movement, many of the anti-war activists are proponents of what they call the just war theory, meaning that if there's going to be a war, it has to be a just war, and a key component of just war is that you don't invade another nation. And so they just reject out of hand any notion of Russia's legitimacy in action by saying Russia invaded, so therefore Russia's at fault. I had an interesting exchange with someone where I brought up, Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, which of course is one of the two conditions under which nations are allowed to go to war under international law. First being in defense of a Chapter 7 resolution passed by the Security Council that identifies a threat of such magnitude that military force is authorized to eliminate or neutralize that threat. We saw a Chapter 7 resolution used to justify Operation Desert Storm in 1991 after the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. Article 51 is self-defense. That is, that a nation has an inherent right to defend itself if attacked. Russia has articulated a case for its actions in Ukraine under Article 51. And unfortunately, most peace activists aren't international lawyers or experts in the legal aspects of the legality of war. If they were, then they would know that Article 51, even though it speaks of self-defense, incorporates what's known as preemptive self-defense as a legitimate course of action. That is, that if a threat exists of such a magnitude and of such eminence that if you wait for them to attack, you will be disadvantaged, that you have a right to preempt this threat. Under international law, this is quantified in what they call the Caroline Affair, which was an American ship, I think, in 1848, trying to smuggle Canadian rebels and guns into what was then British Canada. And the ship was intercepted by the British Navy. And the United States said, "You attacked us." And the British made a case saying, no, we acted in self-defense, but we had to preempt this boat from getting ashore. And the American Supreme Court heard the case and found in favor of the British. They call it the Caroline precedent. And the Caroline precedent is cited to this day as a justification for preemptive self-defense. Why do I bring this up? Because NATO, in justifying its actions against Serbia in 1999, brought up Article 51 in preemptive collective self-defense. And they cited the Caroline precedent as justification. Russia has done the same thing with Ukraine. They say that this preemptive collective self-defense. What do you mean by collective? Well, we have Lugansk and Donetsk, who were Ukrainian territory, so Russia had no legal justification to intervene, declaring their independence, and that independence being recognized by Russia. So now they're independent entities that Russia can enter into a collective security agreement with. And now the threat posed by the Ukrainian military is imminent and of such a scale that Russia justifies preemption. And people say, well, that's just cute little legalisms, Ritter. You just painted a nice, ridiculous, stupid thing that certifies why we believe Russia's wrong. But now you have to put that into perspective. Let's back up now. 1990, 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, 1990, discussions between Gorbachev, Shevardnadze, Jim Baker, other NATO people about the future of NATO. What happens if Russian troops leave, or Soviet troops leave East Germany? And we now have the cable from James Baker to the State Department saying, we promised the Soviets that we would not expand NATO 1 inch eastward, would not do that. And yet, from the very beginning, NATO did expand. So NATO is expanding for what purpose? The purpose is to destabilize Russia, simply put, to destabilize Russia. So NATO expansion is, by intent, designed to destabilize Russia. In 2008, April, William Burns, who at that time was the U.S. ambassador to Russia, currently the CIA director, wrote a memorandum about NATO incorporating Ukraine called Niet means Niet, and basically said the Russians have made it clear that if we invite Ukraine to join NATO, this will lead to an escalation of tensions that will result in a Russian military intervention that will cost Ukraine the Donbass and Crimea. Why is this important? Because it was clear at the highest levels of American government that to invite Ukraine into NATO would lead to a conflict in Ukraine, cause effect. And yet in November of 2008, we invited Ukraine to come in, which means the United States always intended this to end in a conflict because we knew what would happen. We did it anyways. We knew it was going to end in a conflict. Now we go to 2014, the coup in Maidan, where the United States, remember Victoria Nuland's intercepted phone call? My boy, Yatsenko, handpicking a government, even though the constitutionally elected government of Viktor Yanukovych is still in power. It meant we want to overthrow him, replace him with a handpicked government to do what? To bring Ukraine into NATO. So we picked this fight. Now, it didn't go well because in September 2014, September 2014, the Ukrainian army is trapped in the Donbass. The rebels rose up. They received assistance from Russia, and they surrounded the Ukrainian army in the center of Donetsk. And the Ukrainian army, 10,000 at that time, was on the verge of being destroyed. That's when the Ukrainian president called Angela Merkel and begged, please help us, please help us. And so through the vehicle of the Normandy format, Merkel and Hollande, the French president, met with Putin and negotiated a ceasefire. A ceasefire. Now, this is at a time when Russia is ready to crush the Ukrainians. It was going to end. It was all going to be over. The Donbass would be liberated, the Ukrainian military destroyed. And Putin said, no, I choose peace. Putin said, no, I choose peace. And he chose the Minsk Accords. And Russia had been struggling ever since then to get the French and the Germans to put pressure on the Ukrainians to accept the Minsk Accords. What we know now is that from Poroshenko's mouth, Hollande's mouth, Merkel's mouth, they all say the same thing. The Minsk Accords were a sham, a lie. They were put in place not to achieve peace or a ceasefire, but to buy time for war, for NATO to train a Ukrainian army capable of liberating not only the Donbass, but Crimea, the military option. And it isn't just words there. In 2015, the United States built a military facility in Western Ukraine where every 55 days we trained a Ukrainian battalion to NATO standards. For what purpose? To go east and fight Russians in there. 55 days, one battalion, that's 30,000 troops trained in the 7 years. NATO had two other facilities. That's 60 to 90,000 troops trained by NATO for the sole purpose of fighting the Russians. And the Russians say, and they have the evidence to support it, that these NATO-trained troops were being massed in eastern Ukraine on the eve of the Russian decision to intervene preemptively through collective self-defense. But that doesn't mean that Russia wanted that conflict. Russia was begging. Remember in June of 2021 in Geneva, Putin met with Biden, and Putin begged Biden, please make Minsk work. If Minsk happens, all of this goes away. All of this goes away. There will be no war. And Biden said, oh, yeah, I promise you we'll do that. Didn't do it. In October, Lavrov met with his French and German counterparts and basically said, I need you to get the Ukrainians to approve Minsk. And they said, no, we can't do it. But even then, it wasn't definite war because Russia in December of 2021 gave NATO and the United States two draft treaties, talked about a new European security framework, which had they gone down the path of negotiating this in good faith, would have prevented a war. Russia did everything human possibly to stop this war, to prevent this war. Russia only acted when there was literally no other choice because that NATO-trained army, which from the very beginning was built for one purpose, to invade the Donbass, was massing on the Donbass. The OSCE observers there to monitor the ceasefire reported 2,000 violations, the vast majority of those violations being from Ukraine into Donbass in the weeks leading up to the Russian intervention. If Russia hadn't intervened, Ukraine would have launched an attack and they could have defeated the Donbass. So Russia had no choice. So what I tell the anti-war movement is sometimes there is a just war. Sometimes war is the answer. And that if you're truly anti-war, what you need to do is support Russia and support a Russian victory, because that's the quickest path to conflict termination. And then we can get back to peace, peaceful coexistence, etc. What is Russia's end game? a new European security framework that respects the national security interests of both Russia and Europe. What is the West's endgame? The defeat of Russia, to weaken Russia to the point that Vladimir Putin's regime collapses, is replaced by a Boris Yeltsin-like clone, which will allow the United States, NATO, and Europe to disenfranchise the Russian people politically, gut them economically, and destroy them geopolitically.
Yep. I think the answer to that question was no. I don't think it could have been avoided. I think they tried to. I think Putin tried this. Like you were talking about the Minsk Accords, begging, Biden. And I believe, and I read this, and fam, you might have a little bit more insight to it now, is that there were a lot of people within Russia that were really pissed at Putin for not intervening, for dragging his feet. Even when, what's his name, Yanukovych was fleeing, he was telling Putin, hey, man, you're going to have to get involved over here because these people in the Donbass, they're going to get slaughtered if you don't. So I think he did everything possible to avoid war, but he couldn't. It just came to a point where it's like, all right, you effed around. Now it's time to find out. We have to make a move. Scott, thank you so much for hanging in there. I just want one last question because a lot of people don't know some of the history. You were the chief UN inspector over in Iraq. You were screaming that there were no weapons of mass destruction, which became weapons of mass distraction. My question is actually about Latin America. Since you know the FBI and the CIA so well, we see Donald Trump last week come out and talk about, when I get back in power, I am going to declare the cartels a foreign enemy combatant. Therefore, they can go into Latin America. They can do what they want. To me, it's all about a distraction, looking at their resources, wanting those resources, and having a way to justify going in. And what better boogeyman than the cartels? I have said before, we've looked at Iran-Contra scandal. We understand who's pulling the strings. Pedro Castillo, when he was running for office in Peru, before he got in, he had pointed to the DEA. He had pointed to the CIA and their involvement in the drug trade in Latin America. For the love of God, Scott Ritter, who controls the drug trade in Latin America, the CIA or the cartels?
Both. The cartels work for the CIA.
Oh, could you say that again?
Both. The cartels work for the CIA.
Thank you. That's my question. That's all I got. That's all my question. So we understand pulling the strings there because this is really, really scary. So it would be unfair to classify them as an enemy combatant because you'd have to classify the CIA as an enemy combatant. Is that how it would work? What's your thoughts there?
Now we're getting into legal. Now, what I can tell you about the CIA is the following: they have no morals, they have no scruples. They'll do anything to further what they deem to be the advantage of the United States. And because drugs and drug cartels are, they involve a lot of money, and money is interlinked with politics. The CIA is able to leverage drug money into control over much of South America, much of Central America, and indeed, some people even speculate much of America. The CIA is behind the scenes doing things. It's not that they actually do the daily planning on behalf of the cartels. It's that they enable the cartels to do what they're doing. They don't, instead of using the information they collect to help destroy the cartels, they use that information to further legend. The CIA is in the human intelligence business. That means their job is to find individuals, break them, and get them to work on behalf of the United States of America. And the drug cartel business and everything that's associated with that, human trafficking, organ trafficking, prostitution, the whole works, is all controlled by CIA case officers who use that to exploit human weaknesses so they can build their stable of human sources.
Scott Ritter, thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott, so much. Do you have anything coming up or anything you want to let the audience know?
No, I mean, I did have that speaking engagement in New York City, but it got canceled. I do have if you go to scottritterextra.com, you can find all the stuff that I write. You can find various podcasts, including if you guys link this to me, I'll put it up there as well. And I have a Substack, so if people want to support me through the Substack, that would be, very helpful. But that's it. I thank you very much for having me on, and I look forward to hopefully coming back on at a future date to discuss this issue, which I don't think is going away anytime soon.
You have a
It's
great show
not.
with
Well,
Garland Nixon, by the way, on Rockfin. It is amazing. How many days do you guys do that one?
Oh, we only do it once a week. We do it Wednesday mornings at 9:00.
Awesome show. Awesome show.
Thank you.
Scott Ritter, ladies and gentlemen.
all right. Feel better, Scott. See you next time.
Bye, Scott.
Thank you.
Fam, I love me some Scott Ritter, man.
That last answer is, I mean,
Somebody clip it out.
we have to clip it out. We have to clip out a couple things
Cartels work
from the last few shows.
IA.
Well, no, that one, but I meant the one about war, because we still have people that don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how else to put it. If somebody comes and tries to kill your family, you're just going to say, hey, I'm anti-war. And, I have to clip up the one with Vanessa Beeley and Eva Bartlett, because they address this question with so much passion too.
Yeah.
Because, Ava's there in the Donbass. Vanessa is in Syria. They see this situation and it's like, yeah, these people are as anti-war as it gets. I mean, these two ladies, so is Scott. I mean, but especially when Eva and Vanessa, because they've been on the ground, right? You go and you see people dying. You see the results of the U.S. intervention, U.S. hegemony, the results of sanctions, but also the bombs, the shelling of the people of the Donbass. Something as just the dogs and how and the children and how accustomed they come to the shelling, because this has been their life for the last 9 years. And somebody from the West says, oh no, all war is bad. We need to be anti-war. It comes off as privileged. It comes off as you've never been outside of of the four walls of your country. You can say that, but really, if somebody comes and attacks you and you don't fight back, you're going to be dead. And so this is the equivalent of what a lot of people in the Donbass see this as. If we don't fight back, we're dead. And guess what? They were dead for the last 9 years. And Russia's like, well, if we allow them to come in like they've intended to since the beginning, they're just going to kill us all. Their whole aim, and they've said it as much in every single document, is to destroy Russia, to break it apart, and to basically remove Putin and put somebody else that lets them do whatever they want. And that lets them bring Russia into Europe's globalization. That's what they want. And that's what they want to do to every country, every single country in Latin America. So it'd be like us saying these Latin American countries shouldn't defend themselves. It's the same thing when people said, well, what did Pedro Castillo do? Why did he try to, take control of Congress and dissolve it? Well, he saw what was coming. It was preemptive. He was defending himself preemptively, and he fell into this trap where that's what they did, and they led him this way. So it's the same kind of thing. It's like self-defense is different than the United States going somewhere and raping these countries' resources because they want to. Whereas somebody defending themselves, it's like saying the Palestinians shouldn't fight back because they're fighting with rockets. Yeah. That's the same argument by the Israeli army and the Israeli people, by the way. Oh, the Palestinians are violent. They should just stop. That's the same argument. So you're saying the Palestinians should never defend themselves because war is bad? Oh, no. I know war is bad. But there is a point where you have to fight back in order to push back against those that are killing people, against those that are fighting to remove every single ounce of humanity from the world. And one of the reasons I love the reporting coming from Ava is because she draws the humanity to what's going on in the situations of people, how people are enduring this all the time. And this is just something that I think needs to be said, right? And and that's you can't just say I'm anti-war, so nobody should attack each other. If somebody's defending themselves, that's an entirely different concept.
Yeah. Well, fam, we got a lot of work to do. A lot of, I mean, talking about that clip, I love what he said too about the CIA. The cartels work for the CIA. Thank you. That is so awesome. I mean, that's I love it when Anya.
As simple as that, right?
Yeah, it's that simple. I love it when Anya Papel came on. Another simple answer. Are the Latin Americans in the conservative movement, the right wing in Latin America, are they the same as the right wing in the United States? Simple answer. No, not at all. It's totally different. And people have to see that too as well. Because there's a lot of things, a lot of provocateurs behind the scenes. This whole Brazil situation, geez, man. I can't believe it. Like it was so long ago that we were there for the first round, and it has not stopped. And it's just crazy. Everything we're facing right now. There's so many things happening behind the scenes. It's hard to get in front of, but hey, we'll do the best we can. I was very happy that Scott was coming on today. That's awesome. He was battling through that awful cough, but hopefully he'll feel better. And yeah, that's that. Fam, let's get to Peru because I know you want to get to Peru. Let's do it. What's going on in Peru?
Right. So Ollie Vargas, who will be here on Friday to talk about this. Ollie is from Bolivia, half Bolivian. So Bolivia and Peru, if you don't know, are right next to each other. Lithium triangle right there, Chile, Bolivia, Peru, or that whole area.
I'm glad he proves my point here, though, fam. He says coup attempt in Brazil obviously failed, but a real coup, thank you very much, Bobby, has taken place in Peru. Those opposing it are being gunned down in the streets. The international community and the media are deliberately ignoring it. And it does make me kind of like when I went onto that Twitter space, fam, the other day, it said, I know everybody sitting here is crying foul in Brazil, but right now we have an actual legislative Western-backed coup. Lisa Kenna has already been to Peru, CIA hack, and she's been in there and she's already granted and anointed the second in charge over Pedro Castillo to take over. Why isn't anybody saying anything about that? We didn't have back and forth on it, but somebody disagreed with me and said that what Pedro Castillo did was illegal, yada, yada, yada. I don't think they understand the history of what's going on, fam. Why don't you break it down what Ollie's saying over here?
Right. So what Ollie's referencing is that what Pasta just said. You had Lisa McKenna go there. Lisa Kenna go there. And I always say McKenna. I don't know why. Lisa Kenna went in there, right? And she has worked for the CIA for years. I believe it was 9 years she worked for the CIA. Immediately, not just her, but the OAS congratulated the vice president with no questions asked. Those were the actions of the United States. Meanwhile, Mexico, Bolivia, Colombia, Nicaragua, so many countries were just like, wait a minute, Venezuela, no, Pedro Castillo deserves to be heard. They weren't recognizing this whole situation. They were offering asylum. Mexico offered asylum to Pedro Castillo. He was stopped from going. His family was received in Mexico. Now, what's going on between Mexico and Peru? A lot of people are just completely misinterpreting this. The media, the mainstream media, is portraying that Mexico and Peru are fighting and that, this is just awful and the two countries are at war. No, Mexico refuses to recognize the current president because AMLO knows that this president was put in with the backing of the United States. And we know from even before Pedro Castillo went into the election, from the time I was in Peru, and of course from the history that we've talked about Peru, that Peru has had a neoliberal government that has put multinational corporations within it to pretty much get so much out of the country's resources, copper and lithium, outside of the country, which was why Pedro Castillo's mantra when he came in was no more poor people in a rich country, because the Peru and Bolivia and Brazil and all these countries are all wealthy in terms of minerals, in terms of natural resources. And right now, as we're gearing into this fourth industrial revolution, those minerals and those elements and those resources are going to be top priority, which is why you're going to see a lot more news about Africa, because Africa is also doing this. They're also trying to push the West out because they're also being raped of their resources. All of this money is going out of these countries in Africa, whether it's the Congo, whether it's these countries in Nigeria. And of course, they also get the brunt of all the waste that comes from that, which while the EU gets to boast about how green they are, that is a reality that we live in. This is why we're talking about the global South, because that is the global South is thought of as the Europe and the United States as dump, where they can just dump whatever, where they can just take whatever. And that's a reality. I'm not exaggerating. That's what's been happening. So when we're talking about Peru, why are these people, right, not paying attention? Why is the media not paying attention? Well, it's because it's a bunch of working class Peruvians, mainly indigenous, mainly rural, from the areas outside of the capital, fighting and saying, hey, we don't want this illegitimate Congress. We don't want this illegitimate president. We want Pedro Castillo released. And we want this because this is what we want. We're not heard ever. And this needs to happen. So here's a really good thread, fam. Did you have anything to say before?
Well, I just want to point out that, listen, obviously, just when it comes to Brazil, like, I think we get some criticisms. I get some criticisms for not necessarily playing the team sports mentality. But what I understand from my leftist friends that actually go down there and they speak about these things, especially in Brazil, just like Peru, it's the Afro-Indigenous people, the indigenous people of the culture who've been shit on, who are actually asking for change, who want this leftist social movement because they want a chance and an opportunity to keep their own resources. Just when they say, hey, no more being poor in a rich country, this is what these people are talking about. The people who have no voices out there, who have been forgotten throughout this whole thing with the whole Brazil situation, except sometimes when they try to exploit this one particular indigenous tribe or chief, right, fam? They've avoided even going into the favelas and talking to these people. Instead, they've just painted them off as criminals, as drug dealers. Literally Matthew Terman saying that the people coming down from the favelas are going to be Venezuelan mercenaries. And this is like the Marxism and the culture changes are coming. They're forgetting about these indigenous people who are getting murdered and massacred. I believe Whitney Webb talked about in Peru, they would just blindfold people and march them off cliffs and kill them. And nobody was ever telling their story. Nobody was
And it was the mining.
Yes,
it was the mining towns.
They would just
because it's all
cliff. Go ahead, fam.
Because it's all about these minerals. That's what this is about. Like, so all the people that care about globalism and and all these things that they talk about, the WEF, here it is in display. This is the real-time consequences of what Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and these people want to do. This is exactly it. You only pay attention when it's some sort of, Lula is led by Soros. Okay, how about you pay attention when here are the effects of what this is, because this is what this is about here in Peru. This is all that this is about. And the West needs to start understanding it's not going to look like some, necessarily something juicy, like Pasta likes to say, oh my God, just money and money, this and that. This is what it looks like actually in Africa and South America. Exactly this. So initially it started with 14 deaths in Juliaca in Puno, which is a region that is close to the border with Bolivia in Peru. Okay. And it's east of the country. So it's in the inner region of the country, close to Bolivia. So this is a more rural region. It's still a major, well-known city, region in Peru, but it's a region that is extremely full of indigenous people. It's extremely pro, anti this government, pro Castillo. So that ended up happening. And it was really bad. So let's go through the thread, because in the days leading up to this, the violence had escalated. So just to be clear on this whole situation, by the way, it says the Peruvian government and media have worked in a concerted campaign to demonize indigenous peoples who have demanded the liberation of jailed President Pedro Castillo, the closing of Peru's corrupt Congress, and the call for new plurinational and anti-neoliberal constitution. I want to reiterate something right here now. When we're talking about, as Pasta just mentioned, when we talk about the right wing in Latin America, we're talking about the Western-backed, US-backed CIA, neoliberal, actual right wing. We're talking about squad sniper shootings. We're talking about government-sanctioned death squads. We're talking about that. In Nicaragua, for example, it was the Somozas. In Honduras, it was the cartels. In Bolivia, it was the same type of fascist type of regime where they were just trying to kill all the Bolivians, if you recall, in 2019. Which, by the way, the reason people like Ollie are talking about Peru too, it's because there's such a similarity with what happened in Bolivia. and nobody was talking about it. I mean, people were getting massacred, and of course, Evo Morales was ousted. Nobody was talking about it. This hardly ever gets any coverage. A lot of that is not just intentional. A lot of that is because people don't know anything about Latin America, so they don't even know where to begin. And it's up to people like us, and then me, to educate people on it. Even big news outlets have to be educated on it because it's so historically based, and the politics aren't something we're discussing because we usually discuss Europe and we usually discuss the United States and things like that. You don't really get to discuss the inner workings of countries like Peru. But now, with the changes that are coming, especially with the fourth industrial revolution, you're going to have to be hearing more about that, because this is where we're going to see the shift. I believe after the Biden administration, I think we're going to see the shift to Latin America and Africa.
Donald Trump, and if it's
Yeah.
not Donald Trump, you got that Cusano, Ron DeSantis, all pro in the pockets of Israel and APEC, all those guys, all Western media powers. And let's not forget, you were talking about how Bolivia was so close to what was going on in Peru. Remember what Elon Musk said, fam. We'll coup who we want to coup. It's about the lithium. It's about the cobalt. It's about the nickel. It's about corporations controlling it, just like it was back then when they were controlling the natural resources, the UFC, and bananas. Remember? I mean, this is what it's about. We go into these countries, we rape their resources, we extract them, we thrust austerity measures onto the people themselves, and it's on the back. The loans from the IMF and all these other banks are on the backs of the everyday working people in these countries. And that's what's going on, fam. So I'll go back to the thread. So
yeah. And so the Peruvian government, if you just go back,
bad.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, and so they started this mobilization called the mobilization of December 15th, right? And this was a mobilization where they're just striking, they're stopping. It's called like a paro nacional. A paro nacional is the normal name, right? And they want popular sovereignty. This is usually what most of the time these people want. They want national sovereignty. They want a new Congress. They want a Congress that represents them. I said this before Pedro Castillo was elected. The Peruvian Congress has way too much power. They're so corrupt. They've gotten rid of like 7 presidents. There's none of them survive. They're all ousted. People are done with that, especially with Pedro Castillo, because he was a president that the people felt represented by. And I say this still because even though he became less popular as his presidency went by because he appeared weak, the numbers that we're looking at were in Lima. Outside of Lima, he was still somebody that people were happy that he was elected, because he did speak against multinational corporations. He did want to focus on making Peru for the Peruvian people. So those are the things, and he focused, of course, on the indigenous.
And the DEA too, as well. I want to point that out. That's another entity in which the West was never going to happen. And let's be honest, the Peruvians from the get-go, a lot of them, even when you talk to the people who aren't Castillo friendly, they want their own constitution that's free of the West influence. That's what they want. And that's what they got in Afghanistan, and that's what they got in Peru. They got a constitution where the West can get on the phone, make a phone call, say Lisa Kenna's on her way, get him out before he does any more damage, just like they did to Imran Khan over there. They have their people in play, and their constitution is in favor of Western influence. It's unlike, what's going on in Bolivia, where they're separating themselves, what's going on in Venezuela, where they're separating themselves. They want the West out. This has always been and always will be about national sovereignty, allowing these people to make decisions what happens with their own resources in their country, with their own constitution, the way they want to run it, not the way the West does. Of course, there's going to be differences within the people in their own country, but it's up to them to work it out, not us to tell them what to do.
Right. Exactly. And then I guess the next part I just want to point out. So when they say right wing, that's what they're talking about, right? And the left wing is different as well in these countries. What they're talking about economics. They're talking about literally being able to elect a new Congress. When we talk about left wing in the United States, we're talking about social justice issues that affect like 2% of the population. And like it's a completely different sector, completely different reality. These people are talking about tangible gains. And so this, of course, they mentioned Lula da Silva, Luis Arce in Bolivia. And then so Peru recently banned Bolivian politician Evo Morales amid rising tensions. So this is what I'm talking about here. Pedro Castillo would have never done that. This is like, I mean, these two nations are so kind of like Venezuela and Colombia. I mean, these are like, brother nations. So this is what happened. Peru bans Bolivian Evo Morales amid rising tensions. Morales has criticized the removal of former President Pedro Castillo, who tried to dissolve Peru's Congress last month. So, of course, the focus is on dissolving Peru's Congress. It's not focused on why, right? If I'm a good journalist of a mainstream media outlet, you have to talk about why. You can't just say, "Oh, he tried to dissolve Congress." That's not telling the whole story. You're only telling, and you're spinning it that way. You're not telling the whole story, because the whole story, of course, doesn't work for the narrative that the United States is trying to basically keep people away from. And so there it is. This is what's going on here. These are some of the indigenous people that have been protesting. So I just wanted to point that out. If you see this flag, that flag was of course also put out in Bolivia as well during the 2019
Indigenous
pushback
flag, right?
against the coup attempt. Yes.
It's the indigenous people's flag, right, fam?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it has nothing to do with anything else. Some people were like, is that no, it's not an LGBTQ
Come on, fam. Let the
flag.
people let the people dream. Okay.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry, fam.
Okay, and I think that's it for that.
I think it is. Let me make sure
Yeah.
I got to get to the next one. Guys, do us a favor. Hit the like button. Hit the share button. Combo Couch here. We're on Rumble. We're on Rockfin. If you're a premium member, we're hanging out on YouTube for a little while. But you can never tell how long, because always they can shut us down and say, shut on up. We don't want to hear what you have to say anymore. Fam, I want to make sure I get the right tweet up. Here it is. Let's go on and continue with the show. So here you go.
Okay, so more on this massacre. It went up to 17 from 14. And before that, in the days leading up to that, police were actually caught firing at demonstrators and even shot this photojournalist, Valdir Mejia. And I said, reminder that the Alcino Castillo leading to the government crackdown was U.S. backed. So look at this picture right here. This is the police. Look what they're pointing at. They're pointing at this journalist. He took this picture, and they're pointing directly at him with their guns. Okay, that's not allowed. He's a journalist. He had credentials. So there, even CNN and Espanol and others were like, hey, there has to be an investigation into this, because this isn't cool. Like you're pointing guns at journalists. The last time I saw that was in in the riots, the George Floyd protests that were happening in LA. They started pointing guns. The LAPD, which by the way, I think they're still on trial. Well, there's still a what is it, like a case, a class action lawsuit that me and Johnny are a part of. And then for LA, and then of course in when we were in Oregon, in Portland, and they were pointing, the FBI was pointing the
DHS. I mean,
DHS,
all these feds. There was all different types
all
of
the feds
there. They were just grabbing people without reading them their rights, taking them off the streets. It was some crazy stuff there. And, that's what I'm saying. Abuse of power is abuse of power across the board.
Yeah. And I mean, and a lot of people have been killed in Peru thus far. So I said, he caught the police aiming at him. It happened multiple times, and he was actually shot in the leg. And so, like I said, they're demanding investigations on this. So that's what's been happening in the last few days. And it's called a massacre because these people, I don't know, Pasta has pointed it out before, they don't have like weapons. Like their weapons are literal rocks. Like that's what that lady was holding, the, 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 going like this, and like that's what they have. They don't have weapons. So that's why Ben Shapiro irritated me, trying to paint these people as the ones that are doing the killing when it's literally the police
Yeah.
and the government sanctioning it. It's a lie. It's a lie. It shows nothing, but it's literally you're blatantly lying about this stuff.
It sucks though, because that whole ecosphere is like, oh, it's leftists, they're bad, it's rightists, they're okay. You know what I'm saying? Like if there's something goes on with the right, it's domestic terrorists and the coup. If it's the left, it's angry rioters, communist rioters. It's the way they frame things. They're just in full-fledged team sports mode right now. You know what I'm saying? I even have sympathy for those people in Brazil that went in there. There was one dude who was shot in the leg. I thought it was awful the way he was bleeding out and stuff. I think it's terrible. You know what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, I all look at this as just a whole. This is what the 1%ers or the 0.001%ers, the people who will pull the strings want. They want mass chaos, people pointing at their neighbors, and people like Ben Shapiro and Steve Bannon and Matthew Turman are good at doing that, are good at moving people to one side or the other. We have to understand what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. We're being played.
Yeah, and he has a huge following. That's why it's irritating.
He's such that dude.
And so these are the Peruvian. Again, this is talking about that again. So you can just scroll. This is graphic content, and I want to show people this video so you guys can see this isn't getting shown. So here it is. Let's just show the video. There's a few more if you scroll after. Okay. So if you just go up, just to read the description so people know what's going on. Police beating protesters in Juliaca. At least 17 protesters were killed. Okay. So these protesters, again, their demand is a new Congress, their demand is new elections. It was also to get Pedro Castillo out of jail. But now it's like beyond Pedro Castillo. So a lot of what's going on is a lot of the things that Peru shows, because they do have a lot of Chinese apps and Chinese phones, aren't being shown in the media. So when these people record the stuff that's happening, I can't even access it through my American phone. I can only access it through my Russian phone. So it's like it's very hard to get a lot of these videos unless you get somebody to send them to you. And Kaswachan posted several as well. Kaswachan News, and that's just a picture of the Peru, and that's the cholos, because this is how they dress. These are the people that you'll find in Cusco, in regions of Peru like that, and yeah. So just wanted to show that a little bit before we get to what I said to Ben Shapiro, I believe. Neighbors try to warn neighbors and protesters when police arrive. So just more videos of stuff happening that's not being covered. So they're warning them with the pots, the banging of the pots. Okay, that's something else. That was I thought that was really shitty too. All right, and I think
you got one more tweet that I haven't got in there yet. Well, a couple more. Actually, Kasachwa News. Did we already get that one?
There's several.
All right, so let me see. I don't think we've got this one here. Here it is. I got the Kasachwa News one. Let me get it up for you. Sorry, fam. My bad. I'll put it up right now. Guys, hit the like button, hit the share button. We're over on Rumble as well. Hanging out, Fiorella live in Moscow, Pasta live and sunny but cold Las Vegas. Fam, what do we got here from Saskatchewan News?
So this is the funeral homes in Juliaca, Peru, that have donated coffins for those that were killed, and I just wanted to show the funeral. He's asking, where are the authorities? What are they doing? This has been happening for 5 and 6 days. And the problem is the authorities are, a lot of them are a part of it. And just a couple more here. I have again, Casacho News. It's been covering Ollie is headed or is in Peru right now. Market vendors in Juliaca are cooking free meals for those on the barricades during the general strike against the coup. The strike has now entered its 8th day. So I want to also point out to the fact that look at how people are mobilized in Peru. People can focus, like Ben Shapiro, on the negative aspects. Violence, but this violence isn't being caused by these protesters. The violence is being caused by the government that's literally pointing guns at them. But even if you thought they were being violent, they're literally stopping the country. They're stopping the economy. And while that is going to hurt the country, on one end, they see this as the only way to get some sort of justice, some sort of new Congress, some sort of new constitution, which is one of the demands. That is the reality. What has the left in the United States done? I mean, we've just gotten done talking about force to vote and how the squad didn't do it. And you can't even talk about that, because then they're like, oh, it's been 2 years after force to vote. You're still talking about it. That's where the US left is at. I mean, on cheerleading the squad, these people, they're just like, oh, we're just going to take this into our own hands and we're going to go out until we get what we want. That's one of the things I see in Peru. It's what I've seen in Bolivia. It's what I see in Mexico. It's what I've seen throughout Latin America and parts of Africa. And I just don't see it in the United States. And it's because we just don't experience it the same way. What the left wants is like a bunch of slogans in the West. It's not like actual tangibles. These people are actually fighting for their lives in many ways. And I think the last one is just the
we opened up the show today. Yeah, we opened up the show with this here. F. Ben Shapiro. And fam, let's talk about why. What do we got over here? Oh, wait a second.
Let's read.
Before we get to your comment, let's read to Ben Shapiro's. Okay.
Yeah.
Very odd, that massive month-long violent unrest in Peru, which has resulted in 47 deaths in the last week, has received a tiny fraction of the coverage of riots in Brazil that resulted in 0 deaths. Maybe it's because the rioters in Peru are left-wing radicals, fam. What do you think? Is that a pretty good Ben Shapiro?
Yeah, that wasn't bad.
That was my first time trying it. So what did you tell him?
So he's right? That the media hasn't paid attention to Peru compared to Brazil, but he's wrong about why. You see, he tries to twist it like, oh, they haven't paid attention because they want to paint the left as good and the right. No, it's actually quite the contrary. They don't care about a bunch of dead, poor, rural, indigenous Peruvians. And also, they don't want to draw attention to the fact that the United States is involved. I mean, how many articles have you seen talking about the involvement of Lisa Kenna and all these U.S. officials and how the OAS went in there? You've only seen that from like independent anti-imperialist media. You haven't seen that from these people from like the New York Times. The New York Times is only like violent rioters and protests keep happening. So it's false. The New York Times, the mainstream media paints it as, oh, these people are revolting. Peru's just undergoing this crisis. It's so terrible. Pedro Castillo tried to take over the Congress. He dissolved the Congress, so he was arrested. Like, they're painting it that way. So what Ben shows is that he knows nothing, right? He knows nothing. And again, we go back to the lithium. They don't want to talk about this stuff. This is why the United States goes into these countries. And then what do? You complain about why they come into the United States?
Yeah. Don DeBar said it best. It's like, why are you going to get mad at them when we steal their stuff and they come looking for their stuff? Their shit's over here. It's like, I'm going to go over there where my stuff is. They never want to talk about that. It's their
That's actually,
shit, ladies and gentlemen. Why are you going to get mad at them when they come looking for their shit? It's their shit. So, but yeah, it is. And that's something. It's like, I'm so glad that Scott Ritter said that today, that the CIA, the cartels work for the CIA. That made me feel so good. Because now it's like, all right, we could get that out there, and I'm gonna declare war on the cartels. It's like, are we really that naive? I mean, we would be down to Nicaragua, and the man who's in charge, right, Daniel Ortega, actually fought in that civil war. That was not even a civil war; it was a Western-backed war in which the CIA were pulling strings on. It was a big scandal. And he was one of the 11 Sandinistas that was fighting against the Contras that were funded by the West, flying cocaine out of Colombia, selling it in the streets of New York and California. Freeway Rick Ross, the whole story behind that, to fund Contras. You know what I'm saying? It's disgusting. And we're still doing it. It's still going on, and people want to deny that part of it, fam. So that is a little scary. Anything to say before we get to the next part, and then we'll read the Super Rays? Should we do the Super Rays right now, maybe, or at the end?
Yeah. No, if you want. Are you going on Rockfin only?
I wasn't going to. I was going to do that right here.
Oh no, then we can do it right here.
Let's do it right here. Let's take a look, fam. Let's do it here. I've decided to move something around in the dock a little bit. I'm going to play this first because I want to say before we get to who Bernie is aligning himself with, because fam, I don't know if you've known this, but there's a lot of information coming out there about the boop boop and everything right there. And I think that people should be advocating for more answers, for more conversations. Maybe, I mean, I thought when they were talking about the article in the Atlantic for amnesty that there was like a form of like, okay, we're admitting, my bad, but can you forgive us? No, they're still doubling down on the same shit. So who is Bernie acting like? Take a look like this, fam. This is who he's aligning himself with here. You'll love this one. Convo Couch, do us a favor.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Fam, you got
you.
Yeah, you gotta appreciate the broom, the guitar, right?
Are you serious?
Bernie Sanders aligning himself with Bill Gates and company, fam. Come on now. I mean, this is kind of crazy here.
Why? Who needs 3 war criminals to tell you about the take a vaccine, an mRNA vaccine that didn't stop the spread, admitted by the CDC?
But it's
that we're seeing a lot of side effects, like people passing out and dying, in healthy people. Although they're still safe and effective, right, guys? They're still safe and effective according to the CDC. But I mean, really, whose idea of marketing was this? Of PR? You should be fired. That is like even that is not a good idea. Nobody likes those people. Like, I guess Obama is the most likable one just because he's Obama, the great orator, but nobody likes anybody else. Clinton is tied to Epstein. Bush, come on, Bush, he needs to go back to painting. Like, it's just so, why would you pick these people right now, especially at a time when liberals and the Democratic Party is just sinking. Do you want to sink it further? Oh my God.
Well, man, fam, let me tell you something. A lot of people aren't talking about, and they were doing this in the beginning. We were talking about the very important word. That word is equity, fam. Poor people should be able to get the jab, whether it be Moderna coming from DARPA or Bill Gates coming from AstraZeneca, wherever we want to go. Fauci's people, they should be able to get it and get it at a good price. So here's our boy C. Lawson, Political Matrix. What up, C? I didn't get in touch with Chris when I was in Florida. I feel so bad. Next time in town, Chris, I'll get a hold of you. Go check out the Political Matrix. Love this dude. And here comes their shepherd fighting the good fight, fam. And you got a nice, pretty picture of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. Senator Sanders asked Moderna not to hike the COVID vaccine price. Now, fam, there's a lot of things that I can think that Bernie Sanders should be advocating for. Maybe answers, maybe talking about, hey, where did this sucker come from in the first place? But he's not. What Bernie Sanders is doing is pretty much cucking for Big Pharma and just asking them not to hike the vaccine price.
So
I don't even need to read this shit. Do I? I mean, do I even need to read this crap? I mean, oh my God.
No, but so here's a couple things, right? You got to look at this from the perspective pre-COVID and post-COVID. Pre-COVID, before any of this stuff happened, Bernie Sanders advocating for the reduction in price of medicine, right? Pharmaceuticals, diabetes medicine, where he goes over the border to Canada and gets cheap medication from people. That's all good. That's all well and dandy. That would still be good now. Why? Because people are dying because they don't have access to their medication. That is a fact. Now, from the progressive perspective, this would look as a good thing. Why? Well, because Bernie wants you to be able to get your medication. Don't hike up the vaccine price. You need to be, you need to have your medication. But this isn't medication. That's the problem. This is a leaky vaccine. And this is this is not even a vaccine. This is an experiment. And anyway, safe and effective. But that's the thing, guys. You can't just say, oh, because what are you mad about, Fiorella? He's advocating for this not to be expensive. If this were actually a good thing that was good for people, that was necessary at this rate, that was something that was actually saving lives, and Bernie was advocating for it, I'd have no problem. I'd still give him props for going over the border and getting diabetes medicine and medicine for old people and everybody who has whatever disease and can't afford it. I'm still down with that. But this is like completely just, it's pretending that we don't know what we know about these.
Yes, and going to continue to keep the same rhetoric out there no matter what. I mean, I can think about a million things that Bernie Sanders could do, right? I mean, there are people who have some serious concerns about this. I'm going to get into them even more. It's like they just have blinders on. And really, to tell you this is more nefarious. This is more sinister than anything else, because this is an endorsement of the vaccine itself, whether you like it or not. The fact is that he's trying to stop the prices from going up. It's still an endorsement of the vaccine. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders sent Moderna Incorporated a letter this week asking the drug company to halt U.S. price increases on its COVID-19 vaccine, saying price hikes could make the shot unaffordable for millions of Americans. Senator said in his letter that raising the prices would be particularly egregious after the U.S. government provided around $1.7 billion to fund the development of the vaccine. The letter was addressed to Moderna Chief Executive Stephanie Bancel. You could just write to DARPA if you like. You propose to make the vaccine unaffordable for residents of this country who made the production of the vaccine possible. It's almost reminding me of Trump. And I think I had enough of this already. It's making me nauseous. This was you. Don't let them take credit away from you. And the people were like, Donald, we don't want any credit for this shit. We don't want anything to do with this stuff. Shut up. This is what it seems like to me. It's almost like they're taking out every single step, fam. Couldn't there be a million other things that he could be advocating for other than the vaccine itself?
Yeah, healthcare. He could be advocating for people to get checkups so they know if they have cancer or not before it's too late. He could be advocating for people to get their teeth taken care of, their eyesight, whatever, healthcare, basic. They haven't even talked about healthcare. Pasta. He was like the number one advocate of Medicare for all. He hasn't talked about it.
Yeah.
Not Medicare for all doesn't mean make the vaccine cheaper. That's it would in a normal world where your government and big pharma weren't in charge and trying to do all kinds of things, but not in the world we live in, not in the world we reside in.
So,
And so
fam,
he's not advocating for that. He's advocating for this. There's just so many issues with it at
Yeah.
this point that people know, and you're just not addressing the giant elephant in the room, and you're
he's
just
a
like,
wolf.
oh yes, yes.
He's a
It's
wolf
just
in
like,
sheep's clothing. Zach was right. He's a wolf in sheep's
oh,
clothing.
Zach was
Zach, our friend, was right, dude. This is like some nefarious, dirty shit right now. This is some dark shit, acting like you're
I
fighting
don't.
quickly. And I know that this is going to make a lot of those shit libs we know double down on their bullshit rhetoric, even though we have more and more information coming around that this vaccine
They don't believe it.
trials.
Bernie doesn't believe. I don't believe for a second Bernie thinks a vaccine is anything bad. I 100% don't believe for a
believes it's
second.
safe and effective, huh?
I genuinely think the guy thinks it's safe and effective.
Okay.
I
So
think this is this broke people's brains because people still to this day don't understand that, like, he's fought against big pharma his whole life, but somehow, just like a lot of these shit libs, they hate big pharma, and yet they still put all their trust in big pharma. They hate the government and they think the government's corrupt, and yet they still put all their trust in this government. And like, it just makes no sense. But it makes no sense because if you are to accept that your government is corrupt to the point that it is, to the point where it's irredeemable, to the point that they literally don't care about you, and it's actually better off if you like don't exist, if
Yeah.
you're not being productive for them, to put it in less controversial terms, guys, then it breaks your brain because you still hope that that's not how bad things are, but
Yep.
unfortunately it is.
All right. So this is like, and the thing is what could he be talking and advocating for? He could be talking and advocating for actual fucking hearings on the floor from different type of doctors and opposing opinions. He could have Dr. Fauci or anybody else who's supporting this, Michelle Walensky, all these people, to sit down and have somebody who has an opposing view across from them explain what's going on. This is Dr. Asim Malhotra. He's a hot name right now, who's been speaking. He was just recently on Jimmy Dore's show too as well. And he talks about this right now. He made this tweet the other day. The lead author of a peer-reviewed research reanalyzing Pfizer and Moderna trials on mRNA vaccine, Joseph Fairman, calls for an immediate suspension of jab due to serious harms. We have conclusive evidence that the vaccines are inducing sudden cardiac death. This is something that a lot of people want to get away from with the whole Damar Hamlin situation and not have a conversation. Yeah, a lot of people out of the gate were a little bit pushy and kind of just wanted to be right and forgot about the fact that Damar Hamlin is a human. Maybe we should consider him first. But there are also a lot of people out there who are so sick and tired of the fact that we're not having this discussion, that we're going to act like there haven't been, athletes dropping like flies all over the globe, young athletes from cardiac arrest, when it was so minimal for years, and now all of a sudden it's so frequent on a regular basis. So let's take a look at this. This is the peer-reviewed of the trials. Let me make sure I want to get it right real quick. I want to say it right. Okay. This is the author of the peer-reviewed research reanalyzing Pfizer Moderna trials on the mRNA vaccine. This is Joseph Freeman. I'm going to go turn it up loud in the booth, guys. Convo Couch is here. Thank you so much for watching today. You know all the links you can help down below. Take a listen to this. We'll see you in a second.
Hello, my name is Dr. Joseph Freeman. I'm an emergency physician based in Louisiana. In addition, I am a clinical scientist. I was the lead author of a peer-reviewed study that reanalyzed the original Pfizer and Moderna clinical trials for the messenger RNA COVID-19 vaccines. We found the vaccine increased serious adverse events at a rate of 1 in 800. At the time of publication, my co-authors and I did not believe our single study warranted the withdrawal of the messenger RNA vaccines from the market. However, since its publication, multiple new pieces of evidence have come to light, and this has caused me to reevaluate my position. An article published in the BMJ regarding the FDA's own observational surveillance data found the messenger RNAs were associated with multiple of the exact same serious adverse events identified in our original study. But the FDA had failed to inform the public of these findings. In addition, now we have multiple autopsy studies that find essentially conclusive evidence that the vaccines are inducing sudden cardiac deaths, yet the rate of these vaccine-induced deaths remains unknown. While many nations that have been using the messenger RNA vaccines have experienced an increase in excess mortality, more people dying than should be expected from past years. And this correlates in time with the initial vaccine rollout and then with the subsequent booster campaigns. Nations with higher messenger RNA vaccine uptake have correlations with higher rates of excess mortality. While the cause of this excess mortality is not known, researchers analyzing this data were unable to identify any other reasonable cause of the excess death other than the vaccines. Given now the Omicron variant is less virulent and is able to evade much of the protection offered by the vaccines, this creates a situation where the benefits of the vaccine have been dramatically reduced for hospitalization and death. Together, this information calls into question if the vaccine's benefits are outweighing the harm. I believe, given the information, the messenger RNA vaccines need to be withdrawn from the market until new randomized controlled trials can clearly demonstrate the benefits of the vaccine outweigh the serious harm we now know the vaccines are causing.
Fam. Okay.
Was there an
So
echo?
can you?
An echo? Was there
I
a
didn't hear.
bad echo? I hope there wasn't.
I didn't hear an echo. But who
Was
was
there an
that
echo, guys?
again? What?
I hope there was no echo.
I didn't hear an echo. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Now, this is resurfaced.
Okay.
This is happening almost a year ago. They've been kind of putting it out there. So, I mean, there's been ample amount of evidence for quite some time to say, that, hey, you know, let's no echo. Thank you so much. I guess they fixed that gremlin. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things to look at, fam, other than the fact that we got to make sure there's equity for this shot, that all the poor people can get it, instead of saying, hey, maybe we should take a look at whether this shot is worth putting it in the arms of people. You know what I'm saying? Putting it in the arms of children. Bernie's head is so far up his ass right now. It's so ridiculous. This is something that's new right here. Okay. And I'm going to bring this up, fam, and take a look at this. This might blow your mind too, as well, ladies and gentlemen. So the CDC finally releases the VAERS safety monitoring analysis for COVID vaccines. Let me just put this bigger real quick, because this shit makes you just laugh right here. So the CDC VAERS safety signal analysis based on reports from December 14th of 2020 to July 29th, 2022 for the mRNA COVID-19 vaccine shows clear safety signals for death and a range of highly concerning thromboembolic neurological. Can you say those other two for me?
Thromboembolic cardiac neurological hemorrhagic hematological immune system and menstrual adverse events. So basically heart, brain hemorrhages, and hematological means related to the blood and the immune system, including menstrual cycles. This stuff has been talked about from the beginning. And
you're a
now
certified
there's just more
doctor,
proof.
So people should pay attention to this, because there were 770 different types of adverse events that showed safety signals in the ages of 18 plus, which over 500 or 2/3 had a larger safety signal than myocarditis and pericarditis. So it's just, and it says the CDC analysis shows the number of serious adverse events reported in less than 2 years from mRNA COVID-19 vaccines is 5.5 times larger than all serious reports for vaccines given to adults in the U.S. since 2009, fam. Twice as many mRNA COVID-19 vaccines reported were classified as serious compared to all other vaccines given to adults, saying that this particular vaccine is leaky as can be. It doesn't stop the spread, and it is bad across the board. They're now reporting this. These are the things that need to be looked into, and they're just being completely ignored now, fam.
But the vaccines are safe and effective. Don't get it wrong. I mean, that's according still to the CDC.
Don't get it twisted, fam.
Don't get it twisted.
So that's it. That's all we got for today in that section there, fam. We've been going for over 2 hours, so I think it's time to wrap it up. Anything going on in particular? Anything fun?
Why do you ask like that? Why are you so weird?
Oh, you got pictures in the jacket. You got, you got, Fiorella in Moscow. So I'm just asking,
No.
Okay. Are you working tonight? When will you be back on the art sizzle?
I'll be back on Friday.
Okay.
Friday night. No. Thursday night for you guys in LA. Friday morning for me.
Did I miss anything, Jilly Love or Lucky Burrito?
Oh, Lucky Burrito got a strike on Twitter.
Yeah.
And she can't post.
Who
So
did?
Twitter, Lucky Burrito. Yeah. For whatever reason. So we got Scott Ritter banned on Twitter again. And Lucky Burrito got a strike on YouTube. I hope I didn't say Twitter. Did I say? I'm getting tired. On YouTube. I can't stream. Yeah.
That might happen to us after this section over here. I think we're already pushing it by doing this here. So
fam, if we can go back and put the warning label on here, would be great.
All right, we'll do that. Let's take a look at some Super Rays really quick. David Guevara, thank you so much for the Super Ray contribution. As always, appreciated on the couch. Scotty Johnson, the Bull, thank you so much for the Super Ray contribution. As always, appreciated on the couch. Rob McMurtry, he was the first in the door today. Thank you for the Super Ray contribution. Always appreciated on the couch. And Trey Wright, my dog, love you.
Hoo-ah!
Thank you for the Super Ray contribution, Trey. It is always appreciated on the
Trey,
couch.
I love your poster. He made a cute poster for us.
Did. It was bomb. Unlike Bam's poster, it was
Trey said that if you got too corny, that I could replace you.
With who?
With him. So.
Oh, I see how it is, Trey. Sending love trying to special shout out and love to Fred Edwards and Vicky Lynn. Love you guys over there.
Good to see you, Steve Wilbrandt. Good to see you. Good to see Oswizzles.
Teg Derb Namrog. I don't even know how to say that name, but thank you so much for helping build
Popeye Sailor.
Yeah. Helping build the Rumble, guys. We have 968 followers. We want to get over to 1,000. I mean, over on. Yeah. We want to get over 1,000 soon. So go over. The link to the Rumble is over there. Sign up for Rumble. Become a little follower. We would appreciate it. We want to build that site because.
Why do you say it? Become a little follower? No, become fam. No, but none of them are couch potatoes, fam. They're not. Okay?
Well, that's it for today, fam. We're getting out of here. So we'll see you soon back here on Friday. Ali Vargas, right? Vargas. Ali Vargas will be in the house. We'll see him. He'll be on Talk About Peru on Friday. So come on and join us then. That's it for today. For Pasta Jardula
and Fiorella. What is wrong with you? Why are you whining about my bye or Fiorella?
Fam, just say combo out so we can go.
No. Pasta acts like he's in charge. It's funny.
Okay. Combo out. I'll say it. We love you all.
Bye, guys.